Welcome back to The Explainer. If you've ever ended a day feeling just completely, utterly drained, and not from physical labor, right, but just from the sheer overwhelming number of choices you had to make, well, you're definitely not alone. We're living in a society that is literally overflowing with diverse knowledge, endless opinions, and these constantly shifting values. Honestly, it can feel like a total era of confusion. That decision fatigue, the societal pressure, it weighs on us every single day. So today, we're going to unpack a super fascinating philosophical framework that tackles this exact modern dilemma head-on and actually gives us a really practical way out.
So it really begs the question, in a world of infinite choices, why on earth do we feel more lost than ever? It's a crazy paradox, isn't it? I mean, we have access to way more information and options than literally any generation before us. Yet, somehow, all this abundance usually just breeds endless anxiety instead of actual freedom. Because when every single path is wide open, figuring out which one actually belongs to you, it's exhausting. You find yourself getting swayed by the latest trends, constantly second-guessing every little decision, and just totally draining your mental battery trying to keep your head above water. To help us navigate this storm, we're going to look at some incredible insights drawn from a text called The Laws of Life. And specifically, we're zeroing in on the core idea of figuring out what is truly, genuinely important to you. Now, what's so compelling about this source material is that it's not just, abstract philosophy up in the clouds. It presents a highly structured, objective framework for how to live. It essentially acts as an anchor in this chaotic modern storm, designed to help us stop just drifting along and start making really definitive, peace-inducing choices about our lives.
All right, let's dive into section 1, establishing a life policy. So what exactly do we mean by this personal logic? Well, the text defines it as a life policy. Basically, it's your own personal standard of choice. It means you've already pre-decided that, hey, in this situation, I'm choosing this, and I'm discarding that. Think of it almost like a mental shortcut. When you have a really firm life policy in place, you don't have to agonize over every single crossroad you hit. It saves you an absolute ton of spiritual and mental energy, which helps you avoid all that unnecessary, painful confusion we were just talking about. And when we compare living with a life policy versus living without one, wow, the contrast is literally night and day. Without a policy, you're just constantly exhausted. You're reacting to the loudest voices in the room, easily swayed by other people's opinions or judgments. But when you live with a life policy, you protect your inner peace. Your decisions are pretty much already made before the crisis even hits. Now, people might not always agree with you, sure, but they will absolutely respect that you have a clear, distinct way of moving through the world. The text actually captures this whole idea with this amazing, powerful metaphor. Are you a drifting jellyfish or a steadfast elephant? Because without a policy, modern anxiety just tosses you around like a jellyfish, aimlessly drifting in the ocean currents. You're just floating. But by establishing your own personal logic, you become like an elephant, walking steadfastly with this unshakable mind and heavy, deliberate steps. You aren't getting knocked off course easily, that's for sure. Okay, so how do we actually go about building this? Well, the source outlines a really actionable two-step framework for us. Step 1, your policy absolutely has to be healthy. That means it can't be overly egoistic, like it shouldn't harm other people, but it also shouldn't be self-destructive, so it shouldn't harm you either. Make sense? Then, step 2, you've got to determine your ultimate priorities. You really have to sit down and ask yourself, what is truly important to me, and explicitly rank those things. The text uses this really great micro-story to explain this, and it refers to the famous drama Winter Sonata. So imagine a scenario where you're choosing a partner. You might be presented with someone who has, looks, brains, money, and status. It's super easy to get confused. And hey, let's be honest, we all kind of want it all, right? But if you've already established your life policy and you've decided that kindness is your absolute ultimate priority, the choice becomes instantly clear. If that seemingly perfect person lacks kindness, you can just walk away. Your policy makes a really complex situation super simple. Moving right along to section 2, accepting the law of compensation. This brings us to a massive concept, the law of compensation. The source defines this as a strict universal rule. Basically, to gain something of real value, one must pay a corresponding price, usually through continuous effort or by sacrificing something else. And here's the kicker. Absolutely no one can escape this law. Ignoring it, like genuinely believing you could have everything without giving a single thing up, that just leads to a totally scattered life and eventually ruin. In practice, this means making some pretty hard choices. Let's say your ultimate goal is corporate success. Well, the required sacrifice might just be your daily leisure time. The source actually gives this highly relatable example of a university student who desperately wants to join a top-tier company. If that student is spending every single day immersed in playing mahjong or just partying with friends, well, the law of compensation dictates they are not going to reach that goal. You simply cannot have the elite job and the daily indulgence. You've got to have the courage to sacrifice one desire to achieve the other. So, the absolute crucial point here is this number, 100%. The source asserts that the cost you pay and the reward you get will 100% balance out eventually, every single time. It is an equation that always settles. Trying to skip the effort, constantly looking for a loophole, or demanding instant success without putting in the sacrifice, it literally only results in future suffering. You just have to be willing to pay the price for your life policy. And that leads us to our final part, Section 3, Unshakable Mind and True Freedom. Here, the text makes a really profound declaration. The soul is the true master of the body. I love that. You are not just some biological machine or a drifting entity completely at the mercy of fate. Not at all. You are a being entirely capable of choosing your own path. You have the ultimate freedom to decide what is good, what is bad, and what your specific priorities are. At the end of the day, you are the master of your choices. And by firmly establishing that personal life policy we talked about and courageously accepting the costs associated with it through the law of compensation, you achieve what the text calls an unshakable mind. When you know exactly what you stand for and you've accepted the price of those choices, you can survive any of life's obstacles, any criticisms or failures without just completely falling into despair. You truly become that steadfast elephant. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with this final thought to just sit with and reflect on. Look at your own life. Look at your own endless list of daily choices. To gain what is truly important to you, based on your own life policy, what are you honestly willing to let go of today? Take a little time to figure that out and just watch how much lighter the world begins to feel.
Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We've all been there, right? Those moments where absolutely everything just seems to fall apart. But today, we're unpacking a strategy for not just surviving those really dark times, but fundamentally reframing them. It brings up the ultimate question. Why do we go through such intense, painful stuff? And more importantly, how on earth do we survive it? Well, today's source text, The Laws of Life, pitches a really fascinating idea. It suggests that life is essentially a workbook, meticulously designed for our own spiritual growth. We're going to anchor ourselves in Chapter 2 today, which provides guidelines to prevent suicide and overcome misfortune. This section goes way beyond just offering vague comfort. It gives you hard, structural guidelines to overcome life's absolute toughest moments. So, here's our roadmap. We'll start with overcoming life's misfortunes, then hit youth's peak with heartbreak and academics. After that, we'll look at middle and old age, covering finances and illness, and wrap up with the concept of eternal life. Let's start with Section 1, Overcoming Life's Misfortunes and the Two Peaks of Despair. The author points out something really interesting. There are essentially two highly critical periods in our lives where we are the most vulnerable to despair. The source categorically divides these crises into two distinct peaks, youth on one side and middle to old age on the other. And here's the kicker. Because the reasons we lose hope are entirely different in each stage, they require completely different tools to overcome. Moving on to Section 2, Youth's Peak, Heartbreak, and the Delusion of First Love. So in that first peak, youth, acute emotional pain usually comes down to romantic failure. The text contrasts this delusion of first love with the reality of growth. Look, when we're young, we are so convinced that this one person is our only match in the entire world. But the reality? Almost nobody marries their very first love. Instead of seeing a breakup as a total dead end, the text says we need to view it as essential practice. It's a stepping stone that actually builds the wisdom you'll need for a successful marriage later on. Because of this, the text makes a wonderfully blunt point. Ending your life over early romantic rejection is literally the height of folly. I mean, think about it. Once you pass 30, you wake up from those early illusions. Your perspective totally shifts, making that early despair look completely disproportionate in hindsight. Section 3. Still in youth's peak, but looking at academics and the elite school trap. The second massive hazard for young people is academic failure. Picture a student who has literally always been ranked number one. They've got these massive, elite school expectations. But then they actually get into that elite environment, and suddenly they're surrounded by other absolute geniuses. Their ranking completely tanks. This sudden reality check can cause a catastrophic collapse in their self-image, simply because they haven't realized yet that the real world operates like a pyramid. Relative rankings are inevitably going to shift.
To get through this, you've got to make a vital mental pivot. Your value as a human being isn't permanently locked in by your early academic rankings. Remember that timeless wisdom. When one door closes, another opens. Failing to be the absolute best in one specific arena, it just means a different, more suitable path is opening up for you somewhere else.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Middle and Old Age, tackling finances and letting go of vanity.
Now we're getting into the heavier, chronic burdens of that second peak, starting with financial ruin. The guidelines here are highly practical, but also deeply spiritual. Rule number 1, completely discard your unreasonableness and vanity. Pride is literally your worst enemy when it comes to survival here. Keep your debt strictly within 30% of annual sales. And this is absolutely crucial. Never, ever use life insurance payouts as a way to escape debt. Instead, use this severe hardship to actually awaken to a deeper faith and manage the crisis practically rather than tragically.
Section 5. Middle and Old Age, Facing Illness and the Four Sufferings.
This builds right into the second major crisis of later life, declining physical health. To process this, the text brings in a classic Buddhist concept called the Four Sufferings. This completely reframes illness. It's not a punishment or just terrible luck, but an inescapable reality. Every single human has to face the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. It's just part of the human experience.
Building on that acceptance, the text gives us a very actionable framework. First, just accept illness as a built-in part of your life script. While it does point out that many modern illnesses are actually lifestyle diseases stemming from poor stress management, the most profound advice here is about how you use your time while you're sick. Even when you're battling a severe illness, utilize that situation for internal spiritual training. How you maintain your state of mind while your body is failing, that becomes your true goal.
Finally, Section 6, Eternal Life and Reframing the Struggle.
Bringing both of those peaks together, youth and older age, we hit the ultimate philosophical resolution of the laws of life. The overarching message here is that our time on Earth is not just a random sequence of chaotic events. It is a deliberate school for the soul.
The author uses this brilliant metaphor for the mental reframing process. When a crisis hits, step 1 is to stop telling yourself, I am just suffering. Instead, tackle life's crises exactly the same way a student tackles a challenging workbook exercise. View your heartbreak, your financial ruin, or your illness as a highly difficult math problem that was assigned specifically to you. The purpose, and honestly even the joy, comes from engaging with that problem and solving it to build up your spiritual strength.
So I want to leave you with this really profound assertion from the text. Human beings are living an eternal life. If life really is an eternal training ground and the soul endures way beyond our temporary physical struggles, how might that change the exact way you face your next great challenge? It's a pretty powerful tool, replacing finality with a continuous journey of growth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're stepping outside the usual policy debates and examining a highly provocative text that diagnoses the unseen roots of our failing school systems. It's a fundamentally spiritual and structural critique. Okay, let's just dive right into this.
For decades, we've seen endless educational reforms, right? Policy shifts, new teaching methods, the whole shebang. Yet, despite all these massive efforts, severe issues like classroom collapse and rampant bullying, they're still just plaguing our public schools. It leaves us all with this burning question. Why? Why is the system still in such deep distress when we're constantly trying to fix it?
Well, to explore a uniquely different answer to that question, we're looking at the arguments presented in Chapter 3 of this book, The Laws of Life by Ryuho Okawa. This text offers a starkly spiritual diagnosis of these modern educational failures. Now, to be completely clear, we aren't here to take sides or endorse any specific viewpoints. Instead, we're going to unpack the fascinating architecture of the author's argument. It's a really bold framework that challenges conventional secular wisdom about exactly how we run our schools. Section 1, The Collapse of Schools. Let's look at how the author frames the modern classroom environment and its visible symptoms. According to the author, the widely implemented yutori, or relaxed education system, which was supposed to reduce coursework and ease the pressure on students, spectacularly backfired. The whole idea was that giving kids more freedom would, save them. Instead, the text argues it actually accelerated classroom collapse. Interestingly, the author observes that without that rigorous structure, schools inadvertently allowed bullying groups to multiply, literally turning them into training grounds for future criminals. Pretty heavy stuff.
And that brings us to Section 2, the closed sanctuary.
The author uses a really striking term to describe the isolation of these schools: extraterritoriality. Normally, you'd hear that in legal terms, like diplomats being exempt from local laws, right? But here, it describes how modern schools operate as these closed, autonomous zones. They completely repel outside intervention. The text points out that parents, police, the media, they're all systematically shut out. In fact, the author argues that these schools start to operate almost like pseudo-religions, with the principal acting like some unquestionable religious founder, running their own private fiefdom. The text actually uses this striking and honestly surprising metaphor to describe it. It calls these protected institutions a Dracula group. It's a powerful image, right? A system that just drains public tax money while aggressively shielding itself from the sunlight of external criticism. In this closed-off environment, the author notes that parents are basically manipulated into silence. They're treated almost as if their kids are being held hostage by the school, so they're terrified to speak out against the system's flaws because they fear retaliation against their own children.
Moving on to Section 3, the illusion of teachers. If the school is this impenetrable fortress, what happens to the guards inside?
Well, the text highlights a massive disconnect between the ideal and the reality here. It contrasts the original intent of teacher protection, which was, to provide job stability so educators could focus entirely on teaching, with a much darker reality. The author points out that teachers often enjoy salaries higher than your average civil servant, alongside absolute job security. But without any external checks or the actual need to produce results, this guaranteed status just breeds a culture of corruption. It creates an environment where self-preservation and protecting your own status become the absolute highest priorities, way above the well-being of the students. Using another really powerful metaphor, the author describes corrupt, self-serving teachers as warped mirrors. Think about that for a second. If a teacher is supposed to be a role model, literally a mirror for the child to see what a functional adult should be, what happens when that mirror is distorted by deceit and self-interest? The text argues they project an ugly, deformed reality right onto the kids they're supposed to be guiding, effectively poisoning their minds and normalizing dishonesty. Which leads us to Section 4, the spiritual vacuum. At its core, the text argues these structural issues actually stem from something entirely unseen. According to Chapter 3 of the book, the fundamental root cause of all this educational devastation is the active removal of faith and religion from the public education space. The text suggests that by intentionally stripping away these spiritual tenets, public education didn't just become secular, it lost its sacredness, it lost its dignity and its moral authority. And the practical consequence of this spiritual vacuum? The author argues it's absolutely severe. Without universal moral values grounded in faith, schools lose the exact compass they need to teach the fundamental difference between right and wrong. Think about it. If a teacher lacks a spiritual grounding in universal justice, how can they confidently and morally condemn a severe evil like bullying? The text posits that, well, they simply can't. This naturally leads to Section 5, the devil's infiltration. Let's look at the ultimate consequence of this moral void. The text argues that when you combine all these elements, a school functioning as an unscrutinized sanctuary, run by teachers who are obsessed with self-preservation and completely lacking a universal moral compass, you create the perfect opening. An opening for what? Well, the author explicitly calls it out: the devil. In this spiritual diagnosis, systemic cover-ups of bullying and educators who lie to protect their jobs, they aren't just administrative failures. The author sees them as signs of active spiritual infiltration by evil forces taking advantage of a morally bankrupt environment. And the author definitely does not mince words regarding where this is heading. Delivering a super powerful warning, the text states, if a policy is laid down that excluding religion is common sense, this world will rush headlong towards hell. When teachers ignore a victim of bullying just to protect their own comfortable status, the author argues they are actively succumbing to this dark influence. They essentially become complicit,
allowing a literal hellish environment to manifest right there inside the classroom. So how do we possibly fix this? Let's look at Section 6, Purifying the Educational System. The author proposes a pretty rigorous two-part solution. Step 1, we have to strip away the school's extraterritorial rights. This means ripping off that protective veil, throwing open the doors, and subjecting the administration and the teachers to strict, uncompromising external audits and public scrutiny. Step 2, the system absolutely must reintroduce a foundational understanding of universal good and evil, basically bringing back the spiritual and moral values that were chased out of public education in the first place. Ultimately, the text argues that simple administrative tweaking just isn't going to cut it. Schools can only be purified by actively wielding a spiritually grounded sense of truth and justice against this moral decay. The system has to actively choose to separate good from evil, rather than hiding behind this facade of neutrality that, frankly, only protects the guilty. Only then can education finally regain its lost dignity. As we wrap up this explainer of these incredibly bold claims from Chapter 3 of the Laws of Life, it leaves us with some serious food for thought. Regardless of where you personally stand on the integration of spirituality in schools, the text forces us to confront the structural insulation of our classrooms. It asks us to consider, if we completely remove a definitive, universal compass of right and wrong from our institutions, what fills that void? Can true education even exist without it? It's a powerful question to carry with you. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking the big questions.
If we're really just physical bodies made of flesh and bone, what's the ultimate point of it all? Today, we're unpacking a fascinating text called The Laws of Life to explore that exact question. The author presents a comprehensive framework that totally challenges our modern materialistic view of human existence. Instead, it offers a deeply spiritual perspective centered around something the text calls soul education. Let's jump right into what that actually means.
Here's the roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover the missing soul problem, the eternal nature of human essence, spiritual standards of good, the fourfold path, and finally, lighting the world.
Section 1. The Missing Soul Problem.
In Chapter 4 of the book, titled The Education of the Soul, the author drops a pretty heavy critique on modern philosophy. It argues we've basically developed this massive blind spot. See, ancient philosophies, they totally embraced the concept of the soul, but modern thought has severely watered that down, reducing our entire existence to just brain function or nerve endings. And the text points out that by pulling the soul out of the equation entirely, we completely lose the plot on life's true purpose.
It sets up a really stark contrast. You've got modern secular education on one side, which treats us like just brains and bodies meant to be stuffed with facts about the physical world. And then you have soul education. In this view, your physical body is literally just temporary clothes. The soul is the actual master, the real you. So, teaching people only about the physical world is fundamentally incomplete because it completely ignores our eternal spiritual reality.
Which leads right into Section 2, Human Essence is Eternal.
The source text provides this beautiful definition. It says, humans possess life as children of God. This life, when polished, emits a brilliant light. Think about that for a second. Every single person holds divine potential. It means human beings are inherently precious. So the main gig here on Earth isn't just basic survival or stacking up material wealth. The real purpose is to actively train, polish, and elevate this eternal soul through spiritual enlightenment. It's like a gym for your spirit.
Section 3, Spiritual Standards of Good. Now, recognizing that eternal essence leads to a huge realization about the rules of the game after we leave this physical world. Earthly societies and the spiritual realm, they operate on completely different systems. Down here, we debate right and wrong constantly. We form factions, we argue, and we decide things by democratic majority. But the spiritual realm doesn't care about majority votes. Up there, good and evil are absolute, clear-cut laws. There is zero ambiguity.
The crucial takeaway is that a soul's spiritual destination, heaven or hell, is determined 100% by how you live and train during your physical life. Once you take off those physical clothes, you're judged by strict spiritual laws. You can't debate your way out of it. So it's absolutely essential to understand these absolute standards of good and evil while you're still alive so you can actually navigate your life the right way.
So, how do we actually do that? Section 4, Practicing the Fourfold Path. To refine the soul, the text lays out a highly specific methodology. It's a practical framework built on 4 interconnected principles: love, wisdom,
self-reflection, and progress. Practicing these 4 principles on Earth is the absolute core of spiritual discipline. Let's break down how the text defines each one. Principle number 1 is love. But actually, scratch the typical definition. It's not about wanting to be loved or receiving things. True love in this framework requires a massive shift, moving away from a mindset of taking to a selfless commitment of giving. It's consciously choosing to live for the sake of others, offering kindness, and actively helping people out without expecting a single thing in return. The second principle is wisdom. And we're not talking about secular academic knowledge like math or biology here. We're talking about the continuous, active pursuit of learning spiritual truths. You know how our physical bodies need food? Well, our minds and souls need spiritual nourishment to grow. Studying these deeper truths is exactly how you feed that eternal essence. Principle 3 is self-reflection. This is a rigorous, deep internal review and repentance. It's tough work. By honestly examining your past mistakes against these spiritual truths, you essentially wash those errors away. The text uses a super powerful phrase here. It says, deep reflection allows a person to become twice born. Basically, you can completely reinvent yourself and kick off a purified, brand new life right here, right now. Finally, we have progress. This is the outward, active application of those first 3 principles. Because you don't just become loving, wise, and reflective in a vacuum, right? Progress is about taking all that internal spiritual refinement and using it to actively change the world around you for the better. It's about driving all of humanity forward.
Which brings us to Section 5, Lighting the World.
This idea of societal progress leads to the ultimate grand-scale goal of soul education. The text uses this incredibly vivid visual metaphor. It says, a candle's flame does not diminish when it lights another. We must increase the flames to drive away darkness. The concept is that sharing spiritual truth is literally like passing a flame. Your own light doesn't get weaker just because you helped light someone else's. And by collectively sharing this light, humanity can actively drive away the metaphorical darkness in the world. So by rigorously practicing this 4-fold path of love, wisdom, self-reflection, and progress, the goal is nothing less than total world transformation. The ultimate aim of soul education is to turn our physical world into a Buddha land. Think of it as a spiritual utopia where these divine principles are actually realized on a global scale. As we wrap up this explainer on the laws of life, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought. Regardless of where you personally stand on religion, just consider this perspective. If the physical world is truly just a temporary training ground, and your core essence is an eternal soul, how might applying this soul education, focusing heavily on love, wisdom, self-reflection, and progress, shift your approach to the everyday struggles you face? It's certainly a compelling way to rethink the why behind everything we do. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and keep asking those big questions.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's explainer. I'm really pumped to dive into this one with you. Okay, so today we're exploring a spiritual framework that is honestly just fascinating and honestly pretty comforting too. We're going to be unpacking a totally unique perspective on human hardship. It's this idea that our struggles aren't just random bad luck, but actually hold a really profound, deliberate purpose. If you've ever felt totally overwhelmed by the obstacles in your path, this explainer is going to offer a completely different lens for how you view them.
So have you ever caught yourself wondering why we face recurring hardships in life? I mean, it's a completely universal frustration, right? You finally solve one problem, take a breath, and bam, another one pops right up. Or maybe you keep running into the exact same type of conflict, the same stress, year after year. It's literally exhausting. It is so natural to ask, why is this happening to me again? Well, today, we're going to look at a text that directly answers that question by totally reframing what a hardship actually is. To get to the bottom of this, we're going to take an objective look at a really fascinating paradigm shift. We're pulling this directly from Chapter 5 of Ryuho Okawa's book, The Laws of Life. The source material we're breaking down today dives deep into the very nature of human existence, specifically looking at the purpose behind our suffering. We're going to strictly follow the text's framework so we can really understand its unique approach to life's biggest challenges. Okay, so the foundational concept of this entire philosophy is the eternal soul. In the original Japanese text, it's referred to as Iki Toshi no Seimei. The core premise here is posing a big question. What if life isn't just a random series of chaotic events? According to the book, human beings actually possess an eternal life force that makes a deliberate choice to reincarnate into this world multiple times. And why do we do it? Specifically to seek out new experiences. Under this framework, you're not just a physical body, you are an eternal entity on this vast, ongoing journey of learning. Now, this sets up a really stark contrast in how we view the world. On one side, you've got the earthly view. Let's be real, as human beings, we naturally want to avoid pain. We want smooth sailing, comfort, zero friction. But then the text presents the spiritual view. It argues that from the perspective of the eternal soul, a completely smooth, easy life actually yields way less treasure. Think about it. If you never face any resistance, you never build any strength. The soul actually desires the friction of the physical world, because that's literally the only way it can truly be forged and enriched.
Section 1. Starting from zero.
According to the text, the actual process of being born into this world is incredibly brave. Think of it like this. First, you exist as a shining soul in this bright spiritual realm. Then, you make the deliberate choice to plunge into the unknown, passing through the birth canal into the physical world. And step 3 is the real kicker here. You forget absolutely everything about your past spiritual existence and start entirely from zero. The book describes it as a dangerous gamble, plunging from a world of total light into a tough, physical reality without any of your prior memories to guide you.
There's a quote here that just hits the nail on the head. Even if you were a great religious leader, an artist, or a king in a past life, you forget everything and start from zero. This is the great equalizer in this philosophy. It genuinely doesn't matter how spiritually advanced or historically important you were before. To truly forge the soul with fresh experiences, you have to be stripped of all those past advantages. You have to start as a helpless infant, just like everybody else, and figure the whole shebang out through fresh trial and error.
Section 2. Life's Unique Workbook.
All right, so the book introduces this really cool concept called the Workbook of Life, or Jinsei no Mondaishu. I absolutely love how structured this is. Under this framework, the hardships you're facing, they aren't curses, they aren't punishments, they are highly customized assignments in your own personal workbook. They're specific tests, purposefully designed to target your unique weaknesses and build up your specific spiritual strength.
The source material actually gets super specific about what this looks like in practice. Your workbook might literally have an entry titled Encountering Crime at age 22 or Experiencing Severe Illness at age 44. It might involve dealing with really complex family dynamics, like, say, learning what it's like to not have children in this life, if you really struggled with parenting in a past life. The big takeaway is, if a problem keeps repeating in your life, the text suggests it's simply because you haven't solved that specific question in your workbook yet. It is a completely customized curriculum, just for you.
So how exactly are we supposed to handle all this? Well, the author advises that we should treat life's hardships the exact same way we'd treat a complex math or English problem. I mean, when you sit down to take a math test, you don't burst into tears and yell, "Why is this math problem attacking me? I must be cursed." Okay, well, maybe some of us do, but you still have to figure out the formula and solve it. The text suggests we apply this exact same engaging, problem-solving mindset to our life struggles. They are supposed to have some bite to them, they're supposed to be challenging, but solving them is what actually grants your soul true power.
Section 3. Becoming a Guiding Light.
To explain what happens next, the text uses this absolutely beautiful metaphor of a candle, contrasting the idea of hoarding a flame versus sharing it. Imagine you've endured incredible hardships. You've solved your workbook, you've gained all this immense wisdom, and your soul is shining brightly, just like a candle. Now, if you keep that wisdom entirely to yourself, you're hoarding the flame. You're illuminating nobody but yourself. But the text urges us toward a different path, using the wisdom gained from our own struggles to actually light the way for others.
The text uses the actual physics of a candle flame to make a really profound point. Sharing the candle's flame does not diminish your own. When you use your enriched, struggle-tested soul to guide someone else who is currently in the thick of it, you don't lose an ounce of your own energy. In fact, if you use your candle to light one other, then 10, then 1,000,000, your original flame remains exactly as strong as it was, but the darkness of the world, it's completely driven away.
So, putting it all together, we arrive at the ultimate cycle of the eternal soul. We choose to be born to face hardships. We overcome the highly customized questions in our workbook, and by doing that, we enrich our soul with deep, practical wisdom. Then, we take that hard-earned wisdom and become a guiding light to help others who are struggling with their own workbooks. Ultimately, by spreading this light, we work together to build a better, much brighter society, which the text refers to as creating a utopia in this world. We experience hardship to learn, and we learn so we can illuminate the world.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. Think about the absolute biggest frustration or hardship you are facing right now, today. If your current struggles are not a curse, but rather highly customized questions in your personal workbook, designed specifically to make your soul stronger, how will you solve them? What is the lesson just waiting for you to uncover? I really hope this framework gives you a powerful new way to tackle whatever challenges come your way. Thank you so much for hanging out and learning with me today. Keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.